missing persons, because I thought that through that case study, through that example, I can develop some further ideas and concentrate more later on critical interventions and in knowledge production and emancipatory politics, and especially the work of Prof. Monument Group and the intervention mechanism of the association, which we actually a series of interventions internationally. So, in the first part, I'm going to. So this is a very important sentence, because we will see how this, washed down, however you want to call it, euphemism for people missing, 10,000 people, almost 10,000 missing, is being communicated through UN channels, and this was only 2 days, just as the mass killings were happening in Srebrenica. This is from a telegram that Yasushi Akashi sent to New York, where he doesn't talk about people, and that actually some people are missing there, but basically, it's coded. We are beginning to detect a shortfall in our database. So we'll see how this shortfall is later on reconstituted. So I've been doing this work on the critique of the work of International Commission on Missing Persons in 2007 and 2008, and later on my interventions concerning that were largely within the framework of Prof. Spomenik. In this sense, I was following its mission, and basically. International Commission on Missing Persons says that it has two main goals. It has others, but two main goals are telling, and I'm quoting, telling the story of a mass grave, and the second one is mapping a genocide. So in the region of former Yugoslavia and in Srebrenica in particular. So basically the mass graves in Bosnia and Herzegovina are also the birthplaces of the much appraised Bosnian technology. How it's called that way in forensic and bioinformatics circles globally, and concerning the identification of missing persons on global scale, and it's developed by local staff and international staff of ICMP. When I was looking at that work, I wanted to see how we can basically dissect global, local, national, international regimes pertaining to the governance of trauma or the governance of life, and deadlocks and closures of the political as I see it. I see the political as transformative human activity, and this is more, here more talking about mechanisms of governance. So basically juxtaposing, what is being done in the politics of missing persons through these, channels of science or law on one side, and on the other side you have, other spaces of publicity such as art and cultural production, and what happens there. So basically the work of International Commission on Missing Persons can be viewed as a specific instantiation of the politics of trauma in the guise of a so-called therapeutic or transitional justice. And I would say that this therapeutic paradigm is a regime of knowledge and power at the crossroads of human life, nation, state and capital. Or we can go further on and say that somehow new matrices of governing go along concepts such as biocitizenship, biocapital, or biopolitics. So, in other words, my work on ICMP was a way of contextualizing and empiricizing global administration, management, and codification of trauma to provide an insight into new and old, international and national forms of political authority, which have been appearing in the last 20 years, all over the place. From Yugoslavia being the laboratory for many of them. And I also followed through these two major mission goals, telling the story of the mass grave and mapping a genocide, and how they actually what they do, what's hiding behind these two, metaphorical expressions. So ICP is a pertinent example of these operative political, symbolic and ideological economies situated at the very fracture between DNA technology and forensics on one side, and then on justice and reconciliation on the other side. But the key question is, what is it that we are, why is it that we are telling the story of the mass grave and mapping a genocide? In whose name? For the stakes of what kind of politics? So we can say that mass grave is a metaphor for human waste produced by political power violence. It is also a metonymy for post-atrocity or post-genocide order, so it functions both ways. It's a metaphor for human waste produced by political violence, and also as a metonymy for post-genocidal society or post-atrocity society. We might be, as human life and waste, always already missing, both depoliticized and saturated with sovereign power, and with this administration of life and death enacted upon us through the languages of law, science, and religion. But these languages, do not, politically fill out these emptied out worlds around us after mass atrocity, cleansed, of meaning of being together, what it means to be together, communality, collectivity after genocide, and, especially because we are living in times where we are being depoliticized multiply in various ways. We are being mathematized through science, and being codified through law, and metaphysicized through the religion, life. So justice as something that has to be embodied in a political community which lives with realities of mass atrocity and trauma, past, present, future, is a challenge for all of us concerned with emancipatory, normative and political frameworks. So my research elsewhere follows these non-institutionalized or non-state spaces of publicity in fields, as I said, fields of cultural production, art and activism, which are nesting new solidarities and subjectivities beyond the closures of this institutional politics and also governance of life in general. So, I'll just put this, I don't know whether I will use this, but I thought it would be interesting to see what was already written in 1996 when Apadurai was writing. Oh, there was a spelling mistake in the first instance in his name. Okay, no problem. What he called the Bosnia fallacy, and also, what he was talking about, this new wave of violence, new logic of violence. But precisely these non-institutionalized forms of resistance I see as sites of promising transformations when it comes to witnessing to trauma, through thinking and acting upon political violence, and especially radical contingencies of our sociality and politicality, which are exposed by traumatic, experience, by being, exposed to the trauma of sovereignty. And in a way, atrocity and trauma bring to the fore, the fact that that what connects us is radical relationality, and it brings that to the fore, but also at the same time betrays it, also reveals it and opens up, space for let's say transformation, and maybe for closure, but I will get back to that a bit later on. So faced with the work of International Commissioner Missing Persons and their various technologies of codifying and governing trauma, specifically those that relate to mapping genocide and telling the story of a mass grave, there emerges a dominant discourse of international structures, including The Hague, including the ICTY, in this regard, the so-called discourse of the management of affect, the Balkan affect. and Europe. So, maybe a little bit more from the earlier work on the violence. I'll leave that one. So, management of affect. This paradigm of managing affect and indexing affect is actually, you know, the abject results of political violence like mass grave, is based on sort of, you know, magical, as anthropologists would say, you know, illusionary belief in magic legalism. That's how we call that. Around, you know, the notion of the end of impunity. You know, and I'm using here anthropology of law, which has been engaging with the problem of, you know, the ICTY, the Hague, and also ICMP and other international structures dealing with the conflict and post-conflict period in former Yugoslavia. So it's based on, based illusionary belief in some kind of magic legalism, you know, that will somehow end, you know, bring about the end of impunity, and also, you know, it is very much based in the scientific or bureaucratic administration of projects whose common denominators are terms like transitional justice, peace building, social reconciliation, which are quite often, or more often than not emptied out of their, you know, authentic political substance, and they are very much performed in techno-managerial style. So the main strategy of this paradigm of managing affect is decontextualization, evident in various jurisprudential, international and national practices concerning mass atrocity in the former Yugoslavia. Basically, the greater the affect, the more distance one needs to administer justice. You know, that's the logic behind it. You know, there is, you know, various categories of transitional and restorative justice, and all of them are actually, all the operative, you know, models of transitional justice are based on the overarching paradigm of therapeutic governance of trauma, and they have been, you know, exposed to a great deal of, you know, criticism from feminist and post-colonial scholarship and politics, you know, very simply because, these categories, you know, of transitional justice, you know, team with very problematic, anachronistic, and colonial narratives, you know, firmly in the grips of you know, new regimes of biopolitics and biocapital. So the whole story of atrocity, affect, and abject, you know, of the political origins of violence, that justice as a process, you know, seeks to address justice, you know, as entailing reconciliation, reciprocity, recognition, judgment, and so forth. You know, the whole thing seeks to appears disconnected from the sphere of everyday life. You know, the political being reduced to the language of law, science, institutional administration, or by being culturalized in various ways. So the effect of this is further fossilization of ethnic differences and duplication of ethno-nationalist logic by another means. So the usage, and, you know, I'll get back to this a bit more when I talk about the platform of Kutas Fominik and, you know, and the means of reassociation intervention. But the usage, you know, for instance, in the work of ICMP of various blinding technologies is in a complex, containment intervention mode.